Good afternoon, everybody. As hopefully it won't be a surprise to you because you've signed up to it. Today we're going to have a bit of a webinar around the role of labour market intelligence in helping you to understand the work placement requirement that comes with T-levels. So just start off with a quick run through of what we're going to be covering. A few brief words about Emsi and what we do and what we bring to this kind of debate, and then we're going to move on to a bit of background around T-levels to make sure we're all sort of starting from the same point of knowledge. Then we're going to sort of dive into the work placement question and the sort of the challenges that's around it. Then we're going to look at what LMI can do to contribute to helping to resolve some of the tensions that work placements bring along with them, and then we're just going to sum up with a few sort of potential ways forward and actions from there. So and hopefully at the end we'll have time for a few questions, and Debbie and I will do our best to sort of navigate through them, but any that we can't answer here and now we'll do our best to answer thereafter. So just to start off about Emsi, as many of you will know, we've been around in the UK for a number of years. We're a US owned company and we specialise in the provision of robust, detailed, localised labour market data. We draw together a lot of official sources and do a lot of engineering work to make them really granular so we can give you detailed industry and occupational data at the local level. And we bring in some of our own data tools as well. We've recently launched some real-time data using job postings, for example. We tend to work a lot around education, in further and higher education, both. And we also work a lot in economic development with a number of LEPs and other economic development bodies across the UK. And we're also beginning to work more and more around employment, both employment services, but also with corporate talent developers and recruiters and those kind of organisations as well. And so, you know, a lot of these organisations are all wrestling with the same kind of problems. It's sort of, you know, how do people match to jobs and where are the sort of the opportunities and the risks that come within that. And we work with them in providing our products, including Analyst and Career Coach, which help bring data to bear on sort of decision making for those that are planning, whether it be curriculum or local labour markets. And also we do consulting work where we sort of answer particular questions that different customers have. So that's about Emsi. So we'll move on to what we're here to talk about today, which is T-levels. And so, as I'm sure everybody knows that's on the call, T-levels are the result of the work that the Sainsbury panel on technical education did from 2015 to 2016, reporting spring last year in what's called the Sainsbury Review. And in the Sainsbury Review, they set out quite a sort of a big change in how technical education works in England, and in particular an emphasis on sort of focusing very much on level 2 to 3 and level 4 to 5, and creating a real pathway so that, as well as the academic pathway that we're sort of well used to, creating a sort of a more systematic approach rather than the collection of different sort of qualifications that had sprung up over various initiatives over recent years. And one of the particular aspects of the Sainsbury recommendations, which is particularly important, is to sweep away the very large number of qualifications that are arrayed around varying different standards, be they national occupational standards or the Trailblazer standards, as a freestanding thing, and organise everything within a common framework of 15 routes. These 15 routes are defined very much in terms of occupations. And that's quite a big change, actually, that before the qualifications have grown up around various different sort of organising principles, be it subject area, be it occupations in terms of particular job roles, but also in terms of industries as well. And the Sainsbury Review's approach is very much that occupation should be the focus, because it's about preparing people for job roles that they're going to take on and building their sort of technical skills on the way towards that. And and they were also quite sort of adamant that not every occupation deserved to have a technical education route associated with it. There are some occupations in our labour market which don't require technical knowledge and skill, you know, beyond that, which can be learnt fairly quickly on the job, and therefore there's no need for a technical education route to align with it. And that's caused a little bit of a controversy in the past sort of month since they reported, because there are some occupations which we've traditionally seen people trained for which don't feature in the route structure is currently given. So it's a bit of a change. One other thing that's worth mentioning is as well is that they propose that technical education can take two different modes, and the first one is the employment-based mode, which is around apprenticeships, and obviously we all know that well, and the other one is the college-based mode, which is obviously a big feature of further education in England, but they've got quite a particular set of prescriptions on how that college-based route should change, and work placements form part of that, as we'll discuss. It's worth mentioning that across the 15 routes, they also say that the mix between those two modes will differ. And so, for example, they've set out a number of routes: protective services, sales, marketing and procurement, social care, transport and logistics, which it is expected will be more driven by the apprenticeship route than the college-based route. And that's a reflection of what's assumed to be the sort of the best place to learn the kind of knowledge and skill that's involved. So building on the Sainsbury proposals, in July last year, the government issued its own skills plan, which basically said that we like what the Sainsbury panel has proposed and we're going to get on with it and do it, subject to the practicalities of budgets and all of that. And on the budget, early this year, the Chancellor announced 500 million promise for T-level implementation, which sure has given it a big impetus, and you might well say that there's been quite a few initiatives in the past that have lacked that kind of financial backing. And then that moves us on to implementation, which is due to be phased in between 2018 and 2022. Some discussion that goes on around sort of how much sort of we can expect too soon on this timescale. The envisaged timeline is that from the academic year 2019-2020 is when we'll start to see T-level qualifications actually being taught to students, so that the first students will complete their certificates in 2021, and by 2022 the intention is that all of the routes will be in full operation. And there are some important commitments in there around increasing the number of hours of teaching a year to 900, and then particularly relevant here that those in the college-based mode of learning will benefit from a 1 to 3 month quality work placement. And that's quite a big change, as we'll go on to discuss. And so if I can just, hang on, there we go. Yeah, and one thing that's just worth mentioning in the background of this is that the whole approach, very much in keeping with the sort of implementation of the apprenticeship levy, is to make the system much more sort of employment driven, and sort of strengthen ties between it and the workplace, and put employers in the driving seat. And whereas employers have always been a critical part of apprenticeships, with college-based provision, it's been more variable, and the work placement will increase that sort of connection there. So we'll come back to work placements themselves in a moment, but it's worth saying that sort of one of the advantages about the T-level reforms being based around occupations is that they provide a much stronger focus on the kind of workings of the labour market, because it gives a consistent view. Labour market intelligence is structured around occupations, and so we can actually draw data to actually understand the different Sainsbury proposed T-level routes. And so that's something that we've been working on at Emsi for sort of the past few months. Some of you will have seen some of the output we've produced from that, and we've had some involvement with the people at the Gatsby Foundation who were behind the Sainsbury review, and also through them through DFE as well. So we've been able to produce quite a few bits of intelligence to begin to get people thinking about what these routes actually look like in terms of local labour markets. And so on this slide, I've just mapped out sort of how the job requirement, the sort of the employer demand, is changing over time for each of the routes. And so here you'll see each of the 15 routes expressed in terms of the number of jobs that are required in England, and the green bars are what the demand was in 2003, the black bars are what it is projected to be on Emsi's projections for 2024. And you'll see some quite interesting patterns there. I don't think many of them are sort of too unexpected. If you look at business and admin, that's clearly the biggest route, accounting for an anticipated 2.2 million jobs, I think it is. by 2024, and that's quite a significant growth over time. And then if you look to the third row there, engineering and manufacturing, big route, but one that has declined, and that's a long-term story that we've seen. It's quite interesting as well that if you sort of think about the middle of the chart there, you'll see childcare and education, health and science, and social care, and those are three routes that have increased over that time, 2003 to 2024, quite significantly. And if you actually break down the growth, you'll see that it carried on through the recession as well, that the sort of the increasing demands that we have as a society for those kind of services aren't going away, and so their role in sort of technical education will be quite important. And with our Emsi data, another thing we can do is break it down to local level. If PowerPoint does what I say, there you go. And so what we've done, and these are available, there's an interactive on our website which will produce this chart for you for every region. And what it does is it sets those 15 T-level routes out again, and this time it measures them in terms of what's called a location quotient. Now, all a location quotient does is it takes the share of employment in the local economy and divides that over the share in the national economy. So you just get to see how much more of a profile a different route has within a local area. And so I've just picked the SEMLEP region for this chart, and so you see that in SEMLEP, South East Midlands, it's the Sainsbury routes around agriculture, transport and logistics, and engineering and manufacturing really stand out as being areas that are more specialised in the local labour market, whereas down at the bottom you'll see things like catering and hospitality and creative and design, which are lower than the national average. So it just gives you a sort of a hint of what kind of data can be gleaned down to local level to help you sort of think about what tier levels look like locally. And on to the next one. And so another thing that we've been doing at Emsi is speaking with colleges and LEPs to just find out what their thoughts about what's going on. And I think it's fair to say that amongst LEPs, there's a strong sense that tier levels are a big challenge, but it's also a real opportunity to focus on working with providers to ensure alignment with the local labour market in a way that possibly a lot of them hope to get out of the area-based reviews. But I think tier levels give a longer-term focus, and I think that's a sort of area reviews have often had to deal with more structural organisational issues, and the T levels give a longer term sort of forward-looking view on where provision should be. Meanwhile, colleges sort of starting to sort of think about the 15 routes, and most of them that we've spoken to are looking to deliver across all 15 routes. And I think, as we'll mention at the end, we've got a future webinar in mind that will sort of address that question as well. But one of the big concerns that everybody has is around these work placement requirements, that it's a big step change in terms of the employer engagement requirement. And so that allows us to move on to work placements themselves. And so the thing is with work placements is actually there's not a lot of specifics about what's required out there as yet. It's kind of a developing piece of the puzzle. And so if you go back to the Sainsbury review, their sort of suggestion was that within this sort of the college-based mode, as well as being some work taster and work experience at the start of a course, at the end of it there should be a high-quality structured work placement that will be a requirement if you're going to get certification from that course. So even though we think of apprenticeships as being very much work-based, they want to make sure that college-based education also has that work connection there. And yeah, a lot of this stems back to a lot of the discussions that were had when we had quite a big youth unemployment problem in the early 2010s, when actually one of the issues was that young people had a bit of a chicken and egg problem where they couldn't get work experience, and that stopped them from being able to compete for jobs as well. And so, but at the same time, the Sainsbury Review also recognised that this is quite a big ask, because it could mean up to 250,000 17-year-olds each year requiring work placement. So that's a big demand in terms of the employer engagement requirement. And just one point that's worth remembering, I mentioned it earlier, is that when they talk about high quality structured work placement, that means that they have to be between 1 and 2 months is the normal interpretation, and they have to form part of the learning process with students completing a logbook of the tasks that they've been involved in through their work placement. Now, in terms of the specifics, one of the things that the Department for Education is currently doing is running a large pilot project across the Northwest, West Midlands and London regions to design some models for how these work placements can look and test them out with the intention of doing 3,000 work placements across the country during the next academic year. So, and the idea of this is to sort of test out different ways of engaging and delivering work placements and distill some case studies and good practice material. So I'm sure some of you might be involved in those. And so best practice should emerge on how to deliver the work placements, but the issue still remains, how are we going to engage enough local employers to get that kind of volume, 250,000 a year of work placements, and cover the T-level routes we wish to pursue, especially when there's so many T-level routes. And the answer is it's going to be very difficult, and apologies for us missing an apostrophe there. So to start with, we thought we'd look into what the sort of the labour market data tells us about current engagement in work placements, because there is data on this. The UK Commission for Employment and Skills, which you might remember used to run the Employer Perspective survey, and that actually asked employers about how many of them got involved in work placements. And the good news is that back in 2014, when the survey was last conducted, or the published version was last conducted, 38% of workplaces told them that they offered work placements, and that resulted in an estimated 4 million work placements across the country. But the bad news is that not all of those were colleges. In fact, 12% of employers said that they offered work placement to colleges, to college students in 2014. So it's more like 1.1 million placements overall. And more importantly, for our purposes, the median work placement length was about a month, so half or less than a month. And of course, you know, some of those that were longer, there's some possibility that it was actually apprenticeship activity as well. So, you know, already we're seeing that there is quite a bit of work placement activity out there, but actually it's sort of not all for a fee, and then not all of it is really sort of relevant as activity. But it does at least give a sense that it's possible to get work placements with the volumes of employees necessary, but it's not going to be an easy job. And the same data also allows us to sort of shed some light on where the sort of the potential work placement opportunities are. And so the chart on the left is sort of drawn from the report from the Employer Perspective survey. And what you really find are, you know, there are some quite obvious variations. The big one is that within industries, service sectors tend to be much more likely to provide work placements, and quite unsurprisingly, really, larger workplaces do as well. So nearly 80% of workplaces with 100 people or more will tend to offer work placements. Now, the thing is that you have to sort of then try and work out whether these patterns offer good advice on where to go hunting, or whether the areas which are less sort of taking up of work placements are where we should be looking instead. And it's, you know, not always so obvious. You can say that, you know, relatively few employers compared to the national average in manufacturing and construction are offering work placements. But there are some real barriers to getting work placements in those kind of settings, because, you know, obviously their health and safety requirements and the sort of the fragility of what they're doing can be higher than in a service environment a lot of the time. So it's not always straightforward. Equally, we can say that there's a very large number of small businesses that don't do work placements. But the cost of managing a work placement, if you're a 4-person business, is probably a lot higher than it is for a 100-person business. So, you know, we have to sort of try and tease those out. One thing that is quite interesting is that when those that offer work placements are asked why they do, it's the altruism that tends to win out. They actually want to help young people get the experience they need to stand them in good stead. Some of them do it for recruitment reasons as well. About 38% say that they do it for sort of corporate benefit, as it's called, and recruitment is mainly the one. And you know, that also has an upside for placements as well. Something like 16% of FE students in a work placement get a job at the end of it. So it's not to be sniffed at, but altruism is cited by 71% as sort of a reason why they do it. So, you know, it's quite interesting in terms of the pitch that you make. So, yeah, and the other thing to bear in mind, of course, is that this is a crowded space in terms of placements already. There are, as mentioned, a lot more employers offering placements than there are just to FE. That's because they're offering them to universities, to people who need to get back into the labour market for a variety of reasons as well. And of course, also, this is just about work placements, but we've also got engagement going on to try and get employers to take on apprentices, which to some extent offer some of the same kind of engagement benefits and costs as well. And so it becomes quite a crowded and contested field. And so we're going to need to change how we approach it. And so, this is even more of a challenge when the default position is, as it seems to be at the moment, certainly, that many colleges are planning to run all 15 T-level routes. And so that covers a large number of job roles across a large number of industries, and a need to reach a lot more businesses who don't traditionally offer placements. But how is sort of the implication in that? And so really there's sort of two kind of obvious strategies that you can pursue. One is to build new relationships and seek out those businesses that aren't offering placements at the moment. And then the other one is to maximise existing relationships. And we think labour market data can be a big help on both of these. So we'll start with the new relationships, and let's start with a T-level route. And as I mentioned earlier, and this is what helps us to sort of map it to labour market intelligence, each T-level route is really just built out of individual occupations. And so 4-digit standard occupational classification codes, as we call them. And so here's an example. The digital route has a number of job roles within it. So web design and development professionals on the left, IT operations technicians and user support technicians, telecoms engineers, TV, video and audio engineers, and then IT engineers. And so that allows us to map it to labour market data, but it also allows us to start thinking about what it means in terms of the workplace as well, and how different roles relate to them. And so the important thing to bear in mind is that occupations can be employed in different industries. And so in this case, you'll forgive our symbolism. The briefcase there represents the job role, and the buildings represent the industries. And so typically every job role will be employed across several industries. And so we can actually begin to sort of make sense of that using labour market data, and actually see what the trends are in terms of different employment. So here we've picked on the Enterprise M3 LEP region. We've got the top 10 employing industries in 2016 and 2021, and you see that actually they're spread across quite a wide variety. And so the biggest employer in Enterprise M3 is computer consultancy. Then you've got other IT service activities, computer programming, telecoms, and then way down here you've got things like public administration, which is the government sector, and you've got management consultancy as well. And so in a way, in Enterprise M3, that means that if you want to place digital work placement, then it's going to be the traditional computing sectors. But if we look at a different region, say the Northeast, which has less of a profile for digital industries, then we can actually see something that's a bit different. That we've got the same chart here, the top 10 industries for the digital route, but actually the top industry is public admin, so that's the government sector. And at number 6, we've got tertiary education, which is the university sector. And then we've got engineering activities and related technical consultancy in hospitals too. So actually, if you're in the Northeast LEP region, while computing industries are important, you can get potentially a bigger bang for your buck in terms of engaging with local government employers and government agencies, with universities, where you might also be able to place occupations that are for different routes at the same time. And so it's quite an important thing to be aware of, really. And so in terms of our briefcase symbol, and you'll forgive the animation here, if you think about it, that you've got 2 different routes, actually you might be able to place the same industries with more than one route. And so actually, in terms of the 3 industries that were relevant to this job role here that we started with, we now find out that there's a route that we can place in 2 different industries, and so they should be the focus for our engagement activity. And so we can get different occupations from the same industries. And so that also allows us to start thinking about how we maximise existing relationships, that we might be working with a sector where it's for a particular type of job role, but they might employ other kind of job roles as well. And so they might offer the potential to get to a lot more route work placements. And so if you think about it here, we've got one industry, but industries employ a range of different occupations. And so actually with labour market intelligence, we can cast light on what the employers that you're working with now employ, and therefore where they might be willing to sort of consider a different range of work placements. And so we can go back to the enterprise M3 LEP region, and we look at human health and social work. And here we've got two charts, and the first one on the left is that just dividing their workforce into T-level occupations and non-T-level. So it's about half and half. And then the chart on the right helps to shed light on how that T-level workforce splits out across the different routes. And what you see is, unsurprisingly, social care is a big one, and then health and science, but then also so is business and admin. Something like a seventh of the workforce is in the business and admin route, and something like an eighth or a ninth is in childcare, and then they still have others as well, like legal and finance and catering. So actually that one industry, although we think about it as being health and science and maybe social care, actually has lots of other opportunities that we can tap for work placements. And so we can break that down into more detail here on this slide, where we actually pick out some of the top occupations for that industry. And so we see that right at the top we've got care workers and home carers, which are in the social care route. That's 20,000 jobs in the region. And then there's nursing auxiliary and assistants, and that's 6,000 in health and science. But then straight away we're into nursery nurses, which are in childcare, other administrative occupations, which are in business and admin, and then further down you've got things like medical secretaries and childminders and records clerks, none of which are in those health and science and social care routes. And so it really gives you that opportunity to start thinking, we're already working with, say, a local hospital, and we're doing work placements for social care and health and science, and that's great, but maybe we can do a bit more with them. Maybe we can get them to take some work placements for business and administration as well. And so overall, it can, using labour market intelligence in this way can really sort of maximise the value you're getting out of each of your relationships, and really sort of help target your activities and target what the pitch is to the employers that you work with. So, but in terms of developing new relationships, there's an additional side of it that you want to look at who's been hiring in your local area. So those organisations that are hiring are much more likely to have the sort of the interest in getting the recruitment benefit out of work placements, and potentially sort of having the workload to accommodate them as well. So being able to look at who currently is hiring in your local area can really be valuable market intelligence for that. And so labour market intelligence can help here, and as I mentioned earlier, we've just launched our new job posting data, and so that allows us to say, look at the catering and hospitality T-level route in the enterprise M3 region, and we can say that there have been 11,400 postings over the last year in that area, 950 postings a month. But more to the point, we can also begin to look at who's doing the hiring. So we can see here that Compass Group have advertised for 124 of those job roles, Mitchell and Butlers for 109, Sodexo for 65, and so it really gives you that sort of sense of who's hiring in a particular route. And so we can also dig a bit deeper as well, so that one of the tools that we provide to customers is a tool called Job Feed, which allows you to then dive into those postings to actually look at not only who's hiring, but what particular jobs and what skills that they're looking for. And so with Job Feed you can choose the required jobs and which particular location, and you can make this really down to the local town as well. Filter out staffing companies so you can get to the actual recruiting organisations and then run a search, and then that gives you a sort of a list of them which you can then drill down into to see when they were recruiting, what kind of job they were recruiting to, and you can actually see the individual posting. And the great thing about this is that you can then actually get an email alert set up so that whenever a new job appears within your search criteria, you can be alerted to it and you can actually see who's hiring, and that allows you to then get straight on the phone to them to say, actually you're hiring, maybe you're having difficulty, maybe there's an opportunity here for a work placement. So now to sum up, the limiting factor of work placement is what's going to put employers very much in the driving seat of the T-level agenda, especially in the midst of a sort of a drive to get apprenticeships with the levy now here, and the government's target, which I think is still applicable, although has lost some of its prominence. It's really important that we've got to get the work placements for college-based T-levels on the agenda, because if we don't get employers signed up to them, then we're going to have real difficulty getting students through them. And it will challenge this default position that I know a lot of colleges have of offering all 15 routes. I think, as we've sort of touched on, actually getting work placements across 15 routes is going to be particularly difficult, because it does involve getting to a large number of employers and a large cross-section of them, and that's fine, and we can do that. And labour market data can help us to sort of cut down the number of employers that we have to approach by being a bit smarter about it. But it really does emphasise that if you're a fairly marginal player in a particular route, then you're going to struggle to make an offer to employers that will get them interested in offering a work placement, because they've got to see something out of it as well. And so there's a role for LEPs here as well. I think that building on the area-based review, there's a lot that they can do to sort of encourage the specialisation and collaboration, and also to link colleges into the employer engagement activities that they're doing through things like growth hubs, and really sort of getting a bit of a sort of a central thrust going to employer engagement to get the networks that are necessary to meet this. But underlying all of it, whether it's sort of supported by the LEP or driven by colleges, you need a clear view of where the employment sits in your area. Good localised LMI is going to make a big difference, not only in informing strategy, but also driving delivery. And on that point especially, I think it's important to think about how LMI can really sort of focus you on which sectors, which employers to focus on, and what your pitch should be in terms of what placements you should be looking for, what the mix of placements should be, and not to be too sort of constricted on them. And so really, our salesy bit right at the end is that, we do have the data and the tools and the support to offer holistic services to help you succeed. We offer the analyst product that can help you sort of understand your local labour market. We provide consulting if you want a more particular set of questions. Answering, and the job feed tool that I talked about a bit earlier as well can be really powerful in helping you to identify the employers that are recruiting in your area. Those are my details, and now I'll try and do some questions, which we're now getting through as well. The first question is, will T-levels attract more funding than current courses, as 900 hours will require more staff? I am not particularly sure on the answer on that one, so I'll have to come back, I'm afraid. My understanding is that there are some changes to funding, but I couldn't give you the exact detail. So we'll have to investigate that and try and come back. The next question that I've got here is, does this mean that if we can't get local work placements, we can't deliver the course? Well, that's a good question. I think that from everything that's been said so far, the implication is that if you can't get work placements in place for your students to complete, then they won't be able to get the certificate. Certainly that's the policy position as proposed by Sainsbury and accepted by the government. Now, whether that will hold up, I think will depend very much on how feasible getting work placements turns out to be. But certainly the agreed line at the moment is that work placements are an essential part of T-level delivery, and that every student has to complete quality work placement as part of it. With an apprenticeship, that's kind of central to it, so that's less of an issue. But if you can't get the work placements that are expected for courses on the college side, well, that will make a big difference. So that's as best I can answer it, but it is very much sort of the official position is that work placements are required. Are there any more questions? Okay, so here's another one. How many work placements are there now? How many will be needed eventually for steady state? And how many when steady state is reached? Okay, so the situation at the moment is that probably something like 1.1 million work placements are recorded as being for FE college students. But there's two big caveats on either side of this. One is that some of those work placements seem to be for more than 3 months. Quite a significant chunk of them. I think something like a quarter and for more than 3 months. Now, that's probably some apprenticeship activity that's been categorised in there. And then of the rest, around a half are less than 1 month, so that's not suitable for what's required for T-level work placement. So we're probably talking about a few 100,000 that exist in some form. Now, some of those will be in very particular circumstances where they sort of may align with T levels and may not. So it's, you know, for example, some of them are sixth form colleges where they're integrated into academic provision, so they might not count. So, you know, it's probably likely that there's something like you know, 100, 200,000 that are in existence that are near to what we're looking for. So we're probably talking about sort of, you know, a quite significant increase on that. I mean, the Gatsby Foundation, well, the Sainsbury panel recommended that there'd be 250,000 work placements a year required. So it's not quite sort of at that level if those numbers stack up. But it's quite difficult to get an exact number on what there is at the moment because, of course, these are organised on a local basis, and so all we can do is go from survey data, which have to handle with care. But I would guess it's, you know, we're probably talking about something like a 50% increase in the level of work placements that are relevant to the definition that we have now. Now, some of them are shorter work placements that we could increase, and so that might be a help, but, you know, it's still quite a way away. So the next question we've got is it's from somebody who's involved in the pilot and currently working out the logistics of 40 days of placement with a mix of spring and summer blocks. And one of the concerns that they have is ensuring quality coverage of curriculum units. I'm not quite sure what the question is, although I think it raises a bigger point in terms of the mechanics of getting work placement sorted out, that, you know, that there is an expectation of quite a high level of learning content being delivered through T-level qualifications, and then adding in a 1 to 3 month work placement. So in this case, it's being recommended of 40 days of work placement, and then sorting out the learning around that. So there's a lot of mechanical challenges in terms of implementation there as well for T-levels that really organisations are going to have to, you know, colleges are going to have to think quite creatively about how they organise. And when you think about the employer being in the driver's seat again, you really have to think about how they're going to be the critical constraints in this discussion. So, you know, we're going to be seeking them to take on a lot more work placements than they do at the moment, and not just like touch work placements where, you know, work experience style. We're talking, you know, 1 to 3 months with students actually having to do relevant work, you know, because it's not so much that they just hang around and make the tea. Not that that's an unimportant part of people's working lives, of course, but, you know, they are going to have to be doing relevant tasks to get the learning value of the work placement that's necessary. Well, that's great, but then the employers are going to quite reasonably say that they want to have the say on when those work placements take place and under what terms. And to some extent, colleges are going to have to work around the employer to get their work placement sorted. And so it's going to require quite a lot of creativity and adaptability in how learning provision takes place around it.
Okay, so hopefully you find that beneficial. If you still have any questions, then send them in to us at info@economicmodelling.co.uk. Other than that, hopefully you'll check out another webinar. We've got number 2 in our series coming up soon, and just basically addressing the issue of how we're going to sort out which routes to actually cover. So that would be great. So thank you for listening, and thank you to Duncan. Okay, bye-bye.